called Family Day. Twice a year during the summer months, your family could cook food and bring it in, and they had this picnic setting near the visiting room. They could sit down with you, and you could eat home-cooked food, take pictures with your family and all this stuff. Well, they decided that they were doing away with that. They had already done away with everything else.
Hello and welcome back to the Common Liberty Podcast. I'm Jeffrey.
I'm Eric.
Today is Tuesday, July the 7th, and we have a very special guest today, Mr. Alan Brown, who's a native of Erie, but he has a very compelling and interesting story about life's twists and turns, a very authentic human story. So let's load the clip and let's get started with Alan Brown. Alan, tell us a little bit about yourself and how your story starts as a teenager.
Well, as a teenager, my mother was raising 9 kids.
It's a lot.
Working 2 jobs until she was so tired.
Big family.
When she got home from work, we'd have to take her shoes down off her. She'd already be asleep in the chair. We'd just cover her up, and then somewhere later on during the night, we'd wake her up, make her eat something. But, well, eventually, she came to Erie. She had left Erie when I was really young. My father was not the most wonderful person in the world, so she was just trying to have a life. Mm-hmm. So we ended up moving to Maryland, and at 13, I took every little job I could to help out. No, I don't care if it was washing dogs or shining shoes, whatever. As long as I could bring home money and hand it to her and lighten her burden.
Always busy.
Yeah, focused. Did that, and then her job took her to York, PA. My academics were always great. Always did really good in school because I just wanted to excel. Wanted to always do better. Wanted to be better than the father. I did not want to be my father's son. So my motivation was always high to try to do something better. So we moved to York, PA. Me and my brother, who was 1 year older than me, we both got into martial arts. We became good enough to where we were starting to look at the nationals and thinking, well, maybe we'll go on to the Olympics.
Very cool.
Well, my mom's mom got sick, so she moved from York back to Erie. And it was so profound for me at that time because my little brother had got hit by a York police who was intoxicated, speeding down the wrong direction on a one-way street. And he was exiting church that evening with my mother. Well, the car hit him and knocked him over the telephone wires. He went a half a block, he came down. He was never supposed to walk again. So I go to the hospital to see him. I walked right past his room. He was so big, swollen and bruised up. I couldn't even recognize him. I'll never forget that feeling of lack of a sense of worth for a minute because the insurance people for that gave her, she was obviously moving. We were already packed when this happened, so they gave her $2,000 for a 9-year-old that's never supposed to walk again after
That's
getting hit
incredible.
like that.
Yeah. What was your friend's name?
Which one?
The one in the hospital.
That was my younger brother,
Your
Gregory.
younger brother.
That was my younger brother.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, he got hit exiting church that evening. He was in a hurry to get across the street to get in the car, and my mom was telling him to wait, and he was always impulsive like that. He just went charging across the street, and after that, he always had issues with uniforms, and he couldn't stay out of trouble after that. He was always in and out of trouble. And we moved to Erie. As we said, got here, we got into school. We was doing all right. I went into OC. What is it? OIC, industrial industry. You go there for training. So I went there as a machinist. I'm
There's
learning.
a school about 4th and maybe Holland, somewhere in that neighborhood.
That was more like around. I thought it was like 16th or somewhere around in there.
Yeah.
So all right. Well, I went there and I was doing machining. Machine was what I was a machinist. I was really good at it. I was already making tools, so there was something I was just liked doing. So I was doing that, and then we went to lunch, come back one day, and I looked at my lathe. I could see the metal was a little different in color, like someone had been playing with it. I didn't think nothing of it. I started up, and when the tool hit the lathe, the metal turned blue. So I knew it was spinning too fast. It was too hot. I had just enough time to turn my head away before this piece of metal exploded that was in the lathe, and I got a sliver in my eye.
Wow.
Oh, man.
So
Right after your brother had been in the hospital.
yeah, we moved there. He was still really learning how to walk again, right? Because they never said he would never really walk again, like normal walking. We thought he would be in braces and all that the rest of his life. So we were here, and then it was a hot July noon, man. And this guy worked for my mother. At the time, she worked at the telephone company, and she had her own little work crew, and he was a part of her work crew. So it was a trust factor there. Well, this day, July 6, 1976, I'm in the car, we're riding around with him. I don't know how that came about, but we were. And he offers me to take a try with a pill and some beer. I'm like, no, and I'll never forget this. This question always echoes in my head. It stayed in my head from then. It was like, come on, man, just give it one try. It's cool. What's the worst that can happen? Well, the worst that can happen is what did happen. The worst that can happen is, as a child, you give in to peer pressure. And I was a 5-foot kid, 115 pounds. I was, really small. So I couldn't really control that stuff. It's a hot July noon. I run into Michael Bibbs, who was a childhood friend of mine. His mother, Catherine, and my mother, Hilton, were really good friends. She would babysit us sometimes, and my mother would babysit them sometimes.
Extended family.
Yeah. Well, he had borrowed money from me. He told me the next day when I see him he should just ask me for it. I'll give it to you then. So I'll see him the next day. I'm just out of it, man. I'm laying on the hood of this car. It's hot as hell. And he walks up. I ask him about the money. He gets mad. He starts yelling and cussing. And one thing leads to another. I live a half a block away. I go home and get a rifle. Now, the rifle was taller than I was. It was a 30-06. Never shot a gun before. It was supposed to be for hunting that year coming up. Well, my intention was to hit him in his leg. Of course, I was angry enough to want to hurt him. I wanted to hit him in his leg, but I shot the gun, and it was obviously too strong for me. When I pulled the trigger, I flew back. I hit the ground. I ended up hitting him in his butt. He died from that. And it was the bicentennial. Elections were coming up, 1976. So I was the first kid ever certified as an adult. I had an attorney who would have been great for my cause. His name was Otis C. Smith. He was a person of color. He had been misidentified when he was in college. He had got beaten so bad by the police he lost one of his eyes. So he changed his curriculum. He became an attorney. So now Otis is my attorney. Before my trial, he dies. So I get appointed, a court-appointed guy, Theodore B. Ely III. So obviously, my best interest wasn't in his heart. He comes up to the courthouse one day, which above the courthouse is where the county was then. It was on the top floor. So he comes up with his esquire, Bruce Bernard, and he says, I have this piece of paper here. I want you to sign it because we're going to go to trial. He said, you're not guilty of murder. He said, you do want to go home, don't you? So, of course, I said, yes, of course I want to go home. What kid wouldn't,
You're 14.
I was 16.
16.
So I said, yes. He said, sign this paper. If it looks like we're going to lose the trial, I'll get you this deal back, which was not true. That couldn't happen, but he did it. And I should have known, but I didn't know because his esquire challenged him like, Ted, come on, hey, what are you doing, man? He's a kid. He's 16 years old. And he told him to shut the F up and get out the room. So he had me go to trial. Obviously, I lost at trial, and I was given a life sentence. So he never told me that my mother was waiting down at the district attorney's office. They had worked out this deal that I would get a 6 to 20 if I took this, which means I would have been out of prison around at the age of 22. I would have been home versus coming home at 62. So I went to prison, and then I think it was 1998. So it was pretty much 20 years later. Me and my mom was on the phone. My dad had died, and she said, well, if you had taken that deal, you would have been here for his funeral. I said, well, Mom, I did want the deal, and my attorney told me not to take it. So I told her the story of what had happened, and she said, well, that can't be legal. So that began a big legal fight for me.
1998.
Well, yeah, because he died then, and that brought up the whole thing about
this bad deal.
Yeah.
the attorney.
I had went back to trial, though, in 70, not trial, but I went back to court on my appeals for ineffective assistance of counsel in 1978. At the time, I was Pennsylvania's #1 featherweight as a fighter, so I was holding the state titles. So even though I went back to the county, Tommy Myers and Russ Verga and the warden decided we have to let him continue to go to his fights because he's Olympic bound. So from the county, from Erie County, I was still going to all my shows. When a fight came up, they took me to the fight. I fought. Obviously, I continued to win. So my ranking put me at #1 for the United States.
Was this was in a weight group? I think you said.
Yeah,
featherweight?
as a featherweight.
Yeah.
So I was supposed to go to Texas to fight at the finals. The finals means after I go win that fight, I'm now on the USA team. I'm fighting for the United States. Olympics.
Yeah.
My sentence was vacated because they had to. I was coming back for resentencing or a new trial. I won all my hearings about ineffective assistance of counsel, but they left me sit in the county for 2 years, no remedy, and then they just sent me back upstate. But during that 2-year time, I did get that final fight. I fought the semifinals. I won. So now I'm the #1 person in the United States. Obviously, the
Olympic.
first choice for the USA team. I'm supposed to be the #1 featherweight. The judge I had at the time fought. I'll never forget that. They took me to his office and said, "Well, we want to take him to Texas. He's going to fight in Texas. He's USA. He's the United States #1 guy in this weight class. He's going to Olympics." He said the most callous thing, and I never forgot that. It stayed with me. He said, "Well, he was sent to jail to be punished, not to go to the Olympics. So I'm denying that final fight." He didn't allow me to go to Texas for that fight. So I became, as Charlie Daniels put it, not the singer, but this guy was the best in the state as a trainer. He was the best in the United States as a fighter at the time. He was so good that Sugar Ray Robinson's people would not allow him to fight Charlie because Charlie would have taken his title.
Wow.
So he gave me this nickname in the gym all the time. As I continued to fight for Camp Hill. We had all the titles, state titles at Camp Hill at the time. So he always called me the world champion that no one ever got to know. So I obviously, why am I risking my eyes and all that? I can't go any further, so I stopped doing that. So I'm in jail. But my goal, and one of the reasons I pushed and fought so hard is not because I was vicious or I enjoyed hurting people. The weirdest thing about it is I always got so close to crying after every fight I beat someone that I had tears in my eyes. That part of me just couldn't toughen up to that. I didn't want to do that. My motivation was to become a world-class fighter, and I wanted Michael's wife to have my first big purse because she had 3 kids. This woman is raising 3 kids. I know what a mother is like raising babies by herself. I watched my mother do it.
Sure.
So that was my motivation, and that pushed me to a national level of fighting because I wanted to become a world champion, and I wanted to give this woman enough money to make her and her kids comfortable. That
You had
was
a lot of motivation
yeah,
to achieve.
yeah, I did. I really did. I never spent my time in the yards then. In fact, I ended up with the nickname Urkel because I spent so much time in the education building that everybody said, "You're Urkel." So,
Urkel.
yeah. So, well, when these guys when it came time for them to get their lawsuits written out or get ready to go home, who do you think they came to? And it wasn't Urkel anymore. It was, "Hey, Alan, I need your help." So,
Mr. Brown.
yeah, I got a courtesy then. So they would come help me, and I knew nothing, never heard anything about a reentry program then, but I was actually doing a reentry program. I've never made a friend in prison that ever came back to prison. Because I always told them my story, and I told them how young I was when I came to jail and how I felt about this, the struggle with trying to accept forgiveness from a woman who was so close. She was like my second mother. She forgave me, and that was one of my first grown-up thoughts. To have this woman put her hand on my face and say, "I forgive you." I feel like I lost both my sons. I remember my thought when she did that. My thought was, it will always be in my heart to be worthy of that kind of forgiveness. I'll never not be worthy of that. I remember that thought. And that was my first actual grown-up thought that I committed to. Because I met a guy during my 2-week stay in quarantine at Camp Hill. I got to Camp Hill. I was obviously certified, sent on in the state system. Camp Hill is where you went if you were a kid. Like if you were 16, 15, 13, and you had a lot of time, you went to Camp Hill.
Kind of near Harrisburg.
Yeah, it's right outside, 5 miles outside of Harrisburg. I think the oldest person in the jail at the time was like 23. That was an old head to us. He was an old guy. But so I make it there, and just that thought of constantly continuing to do better, to be better. I wanted to prove society wrong, that I wasn't a throwaway. I deserved a chance. So that kept me in an academic mode that I never left. And this guy who was the clerk on the quarantine unit. Quarantine is when you first came in the system. For 10 days, you were in blue clothes. You lived on this one unit. You had your own yard. You had your own eating time. And they just processed you into their system because this is home for you. So I'm being quarantined. And this guy, his nickname was Chico. He was the clerk on the block. He came into my cell every day. He's telling jokes. He's always trying to pep me up, get me, I didn't get it. I said, I don't understand. Like, how do you expect me to be happy? I'm in this world where I don't know anybody. No one cares about me here. And he came to my day. Every day would come. He would drop off like a gift bag, but it's called a basic human necessities. They give you a razor, which I didn't need. I didn't have not even one whisker at the time. A comb, cookies, soap, things like that. Basic human necessities. So one day he comes to my door. He's not this smiley, happy guy anymore. He's teary. He's tearing up. I said, Chico, what could you possibly have to be sad about? You're going home in 1 week. You're out of here.
He's a short timer.
Yeah. Well, Chico said, I got to give you this piece of paper, kid. It's a status sheet. I said, well, okay, what's a status sheet? A status sheet tells you how much time you have to serve before you're eligible for release. It has your minimum date and your maximum date. So he hands it to me with tears running down his face, and I open it up, I look at it, and I said, okay, well, what is it? Because I was so young at the time, I hadn't even found my humanity yet, so I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't know what minimum life meant and maximum life meant. I didn't understand it. This paper was telling me that I would die in prison. I just was too young to get it. It was the sincerity, the seriousness of that had not hit me. The
Your
impact
sense of
of that.
mortality.
I just didn't have it. I didn't know any better. But he looked at me and he said, kid, if I had a choice, I would give you all of my life experiences. I would stay here and do your time, and I would let you go back home to your family, start over with my life's experience. And I'm looking at this person. I said, well, he's only known me for 2 weeks. How could he see something in me that he's willing to sacrifice like that? And society couldn't see that in me. Didn't feel like I should have that kind of an opportunity, that kind of chance. But he was my absolute first grown-up thought in prison, because I didn't get my first grown-up thought from Catherine until my visit. I didn't even have a visiting list at the time. But I remember looking up at him through the bars, and my thought was, when I grow up, I want to be the kind of man Chico is. This is the kind of person I want to be. I don't want to be that crabby guy that nobody wants to be around. And when my time comes to die here, there'll be 3 or 4 people at the chapel. I wanted there to be standing room only at the chapel.
Chico was like a mentor.
Yeah, so I became a Chico. And I always talked to people that came to prison when they had a little bit of time, or what I considered a little bit of time was anything they were going home in the first 5 years. And I would tell them my life story, and I would tell them my journey, what my journey was like, what the struggle was like, and that they had too many positive things that still waited for them in a life. And if they could go home and just have a life. I said, so only when you go home on your worst day, I want you to always remember my life story, and let that motivate you to not despair about anything, not to become depressed. I said, go live a life. You got your whole life. Go live it. All my friends went out and became successful. They ended up with their own businesses. They ended up married. They had kids. None of them ever came back to jail. I never wanted any of them to come visit me. I made an exception for one, because I had got this little stray kitten. It was a feral cat in the prison. I got it. I started raising this cat. When it came time for him to go home, he said, I'll give your cat a home. I'll take it home with me. I'll give it a life. He named my cat Freedom. He took her home. She ended up getting pregnant. I wasn't happy about that, but he spent all his money to get a cesarean birth done for her, and he kept the one kitten that looked exactly like her. He sends me a picture of that. Well, by then he ended up finding some woman. They had kids. He got married. He brought his wife to visit me in prison. And he said, you know what I got out in the car? I said, no, what he got out in the car? He said, freedom's out in the car. He brought my cat to the prison. So I tell the guard that's working the visitor room the story about what he's telling me. And he says, I'm not supposed to let him do this, but tell him to go out to the car right now and bring it right over here to the fence. He said, I'm going to let you go to the fence.
A cat named Freedom.
Cat. So I went and pet my cat, yeah. So years go by. 1989 comes along, third worst riot in the United States. I spent 16 days. This was at Camp Hill. The only two riots worse than that in the United States was Attica and New Mexico. Camp Hill was the third worst riot in the United States. So
it was Folsom State Prison in New Mexico.
That didn't rank at that high. It was Attica
in New York.
Attica, New York was number one worst riot in the United States. Then came the second one, which was, where did I just say that was?
New Mexico.
No. Yeah, New Mexico was the second worst riot. It was super bloody, and then Camp Hill was the third riot.
Camp Hill.
So during this riot, people are going berserk. And my mindset is, my first thing I do is I'm running around, I'm helping all the older people, the elderly people, get them to the housing unit I was on, because my housing unit was a lot of really relaxed, laid-back people. We all worked in the kitchen, or we worked in staff dining room. In my case, I was, at that time, I was the... in charge of all of anything you needed to come into the jail. I worked at New Clothing Issue. It was called NCI, and I had a direct contact with the warehouses outside. My job was, when you came to prison, my job was to make sure you got everything you needed to survive there. I mean, your clothes, everything, all that stuff was. So I got to meet you. I was the first person you met when you came to jail, because I had to come to your cell, get your size for shoes, clothes, all that, give you these things. So I would always tell people right away that the options in jail, I mean, I said, you can, make yourself a worse person here, or you could take advantage of all the free education and things that are here, and you can go out of here and have a really good chance at being successful, have a life. So I was teaching and preaching what was reentry before, without even knowing what reentry was. I never knew what reentry was. I think the best friend I ever made in prison, his nickname was Chicago, but his real name was Richard Clemens. I remember his name so well because when Yard went out for that evening, he darkened up his cell. He lived right across the room from me. He gets up on the desk, and I said, Rich, what are you doing? He said, man, he had 10 years to do. He said, Alan, I can't do any more of it. I think he had about 6 years on me. He said, I'm just going to end it. He wanted to hang himself. So I stayed on the gate, and I talked to him for a while, and I told him about my case, my life, and how it was for me, how difficult it was for me, how much of a struggle it was to live with what I had done. And it's hard to explain to people how to find forgiveness in something that you find more than you really can endure. It's hard to endure that kind of a grief. But you either learn to live with it or you end your life, because at some point in time you get in your head, you're thinking, well, all this suffering I'm causing the people that love me, all this suffering I'm causing the victim's family, because these people are grieving over me. So I never, in my entire life in prison, I never celebrated my birthday. I never celebrated Christmas or Thanksgiving, the holidays, because I always had this mental picture of this woman with these 3 kids sitting at a table where there's this empty seat that was there because of my one moment of abject impulsive stupidity as a 16-year-old kid on his first pills and drink. And it was just a hard thing. I couldn't get past that, no matter I accomplished a lot. It was just the hardest thing for me was finding a way of forgiving myself. I couldn't do it. I was so impacted by that having happened during the course of the 1989 riot, when they decided that they would send a bunch of us into the federal system if we had 10 years or more in. For some reason, but when I made it to Leavenworth, I was compelled to write a letter to the governor, of Pennsylvania. I wrote him a letter. I said, I want to apologize to you for having to spend all these hundreds of thousands of dollars on us for being here. And I said, I just want you to know your money's not going to be wasted on me. The first thing I did was sign up for St. Mary's College. I took my first course was English 101. So I took that. I wrote him this letter, and he writes me back. He said, when you come back to state, I want you to file for a pardon. I think you're the kind of person I want to give a chance to. So I get the papers. I fill them out. I got them with me. When I get back to the state after I'm done in the feds, I come back. I find out that Michael's son has come to jail for shooting a police officer. Man, I broke down and cried like a baby. I cried like it was my child because all I could think of is if I hadn't shot this kid's father, he wouldn't be going to live this crappy life that I'm living. So here I am with these pardon papers that the governor already said he will give me a pardon for. I tore them up, put them in the trash. I didn't file them because I didn't feel like, obviously I didn't have enough energy or positive things going on to stop this kid from coming to jail. I blamed everything negative that ever happened on that one moment of abject impulsive stupidity I had in my life. I didn't know how to forgive myself. I didn't want to forgive myself because I couldn't quit thinking about this tsunami I created in this family. I know how my mother, the impact would have been for her to lose her babies after going through all that, and it was just so hard for me to deal with that. It just continued to push me to prove that I am far better than this act. This one deed does not define me as a human being. I'm a grown person now. I've found my humanity. I appreciate other people's lives. I wanted to help as many people as I could, and I did. The guy, Richard, that I had to talk down off the chair that wanted to hang himself, he was illiterate. It took me 2 years to teach this guy how to read and write because I couldn't imagine what it was like to go to a board and you're supposed to be looking up there to see if you're going to see parole board or if you got a doctor's call out, and you don't even know what you're looking at. I couldn't wrap my mind around not being able to read or write. So I taught him how to read and write. Well, he ended up doing this 10 years. Thank God he didn't kill himself. He went home. He got married. He opened up a slew of barber shops in Philadelphia. He became extremely successful.
Excellent. You have a natural gift for mentoring.
So I was super proud of him. Here's a guy that was never supposed to exit jail. He gave himself a life sentence. He wanted to kill himself. And if I didn't give a damn or if I didn't care, he would have, and his life would never became what it became.
So in Camp Hill, was it in Camp Hill you met the cat named Freedom?
Yeah, I found it was a bunch of feral cats. I got it when it was super little, and I took it to
and then
cleaned it up, and
a brief visit to Atlanta, and then you went to Leavenworth, Kansas.
Well, I started out at Lewisburg Penitentiary here in Pennsylvania because you don't go in the federal system without a number, so you have to memorize an 8-digit number first. Once you memorize your number, because that's your number, then they place you. So I went once I memorized my number. Was put on a flight to Dublin's Air Force Base. From Dublin's Air Force Base, which drove to United States Penitentiary, Atlanta. That was my first meal after 16 days. Because after the riot, I spent 3 days tied up outside in October. And I think the only reason that I didn't pass from hypothermia or anything like that, my job was to get everything that came off the trucks into the deep freezers. So I was in below zero weather almost every day, unloading trucks, rotating food, getting the older stuff to the front. So just organizing.
Sure, staying busy.
So yeah, so that was my job. So I remember laying out there for those first 3 days. I met a guy named Daniel Cutchaw. He was an Army. He had been in the infantry. He came home. He obviously was off balance from having been in the service. He came to prison.
Vietnam?
No, he was in after that, but he just was off balance from, I guess, all of the shooting and all that stuff they had to do. But we became best friends, and we were in the yard together. We were chained, our legs were chained together. And I said, Danny, if I don't make it out of this yard, I said, I want you to memorize this number. I said, I want my mother to know that I didn't do anything bad to anybody during the course of this riot. I want her to know how I died. I want her to know that I didn't die bitter or hateful toward anyone. Or I said, you just make sure she know how I passed. That's all I ask of you, is to remember my number and to do that. Well, he did. He did remember that. obviously he got the chance to call her before I did, because she knew after I had called her during the riot. I said, Mom, you don't have to worry about me. I'm not doing anything stupid. I'm just, helping these elderly people get to a safer place. Not doing anything to anybody. I'm on my housing unit. I'm where I need to be at.
Where did you meet the wolf?
I met the wolf, which was Leonard Peltier's piece of art
Leonard
in
Peltier.
Leavenworth, Kansas. I'm
Leavenworth.
walking down the hallway. I'm there, and you wear military uniforms there, so I'm wearing an all Air Force uniform, which is pretty ironic because the one thing I wanted to do as a kid was my other two brothers were both going into the Marines. I wanted to go in the Air Force. So coming down the hall, I'm walking, I'm wearing this. You're either wearing Army or you're wearing Air Force in Leavenworth. So I'm wearing the Air Force colors, and I'm coming down the hallway, and the wolf drawed me in. So I go in, and I see the wolf, and it was just the spirit in the eyes of this wolf really reached me. I felt that I could actually feel. What I was feeling was Leonard Peltier. I was feeling this artist who had painted this. He's sitting in the corner like some stately gentleman, and he says, "Hey, you interested in that wolf?" I said, "I love it. It's beautiful." He said, "You could buy that wolf for me." He said, "Give me," I think he said $500 something. I said, "Leonard, I don't have any money. I just came out the Camp Hill riot. I don't own anything. All I have is what I'm wearing." They threw everything away. I said, "I don't have a photograph of my family, nothing. I have been erased. I am a John Doe." So he let me get this painting for $100, and I sent it to my sister. I said, I want this painting to stay safe. And then I find out afterward, talking to him a couple minutes, that I said, "Wait a minute, Leonard Peltier you are?" He says, "You're a chief wounded knee?" Because I remember, it was fresh in my mind because I had seen the TV movie, Wounded Knee. This was like 3 weeks before the riot, so that was fresh in my head. So now here I am meeting this guy who shouldn't be in jail. He wasn't even present when all of that went on.
Right.
But even coming to prison, he had that same spirit and that outlook of life that I did. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't hateful. He was so humble. He was just so humble and so caring about life, about everything. Like Leonard would pick a salamander or something up off the sidewalk and put it over in the grass when if we were walking somewhere to make sure it didn't get stepped on and killed. He was just that kind of person. Meeting him was a blessing for me because I said, this is the kind of spirit that I want to have. This is how I want my heart to be. This is the way I want people to feel me when they meet me. Well, I come back from there. By the time I come back from the federal system, I've already gained a master status as an engraver. I was a good cook when I went in. I became a great cook while I was there. I'm making all these things. I'm really artistic. I end up making native flutes, doing earrings, walking sticks. I'm just doing all these things. I'm just making all these things. I always played my flutes parlando, which is from what you feel, because I felt like the best message from me is what was in my heart. So I'm at Camp Hill, and this is where I went in. It seemed like I became global there. Not Camp Hill, my fault. Rockview. I'm at Rockview. I picked Rockview when I came back because they asked me, "Where you want to go, Young Brown?" They called me Young Brown because I was always this runt in the jail. I was like a 9-year-old kid. Even though I was 16, I was just so teeny. So I said, "I want to go to Rockview." They said, "Why you want to go to Rockview?" I said, "Penn State's there. I want to go, I wanted to go learn something at Penn State." So I get there, and that was the time when, oh God, I'll never understand why they did it, but society decided that we should not have opportunities to go to college, so Pell Grants were stopped. Prisoners could not have Pell Grants anymore. So education in that respect was gone. So
what year did that happen around?
91,
91?
91, 92, around in there. They ended.
And also, real quick, what was the cause of the riot at the...
The riot at Camp Hill came from all of the inhumane treatment. It was just, pressure can bust a steel pipe. No human being is that strong. It started out with, okay, we'll stop allowing them to have this. So the liberties were being taken like crazy. We'll stop allowing them. The only thing that remained that was a really good deterrent for peacefulness in the prison, people would walk away from fights, whatever, because it's called Family Day. Twice a year during the summer months, your family could cook food and bring it in, and they had this picnic setting near the visiting room. They could sit down with you, and you could eat home-cooked food, take pictures with your family and all this stuff. Well, they decided that they were doing away with that. They had already done away with everything else, and it came down to where Family Days was the last thing. Right before that was medical. That was the last thing they took before Family Days was medical. Say, if I lived on E Unit, which is where I lived at the time, my day for medical would be Thursday. If I got sick on Friday, I was not going to be allowed to see anyone until the next Thursday because that was the day that my housing unit could go. That didn't sit well with people because now you have dehumanized them to such a point that they feel like they're just empty trash bags. You're just throwing them away. They're nothing. They have no nothing. So then they make this announcement that Family Days were going to be ended, but they would still allow you to have something similar to that. You could still have a picnic with your family, but you had to, all of your food and everything had to come from a vendor company that belonged to a correctional officer.
Sounds like a for-profit prison
Yeah,
system.
so the entire prison, and this never happens in prison, the entire prison, which is 2,000 people, all submitted a 804, which is a grievance form. Everyone wrote a grievance out on the same day to the deputy saying, please don't do this. Now, he met with all his unit managers. Even the unit managers would tell him, hey, don't do this. You don't want to do this. This is all that's left. These guys are standing up for it. The entire prison put in grievances about it. He decided to do it anyway. So we're coming from the yard. The yard's letting out. So you got a couple thousand people exiting the yard, coming up the walks, which you come up the walks and then you split. Either you're going this way or this way down these walks toward the housing units or to the other end of the prison to the housing units. Well, there's a sergeant named Big Bubba. I don't know. He's really feeling himself. He's in the middle of the sidewalk having a fist fight with a prisoner, and he's expecting 2,000 prisoners to just exit around them and keep going like this is not happening. It's invisible. It's not going on. They don't have anything else to lose because Family Days just ended. So now it's just prison time. You're just there.
There's no incentive to behave well.
Right. They don't have that incentive anymore. So he's out here fighting this guy, and then some teeny guy walks up in this crowd and nails this sergeant that's fighting this other inmate. And then someone yelled out, F it, let's riot. Now it's like you got killer bees on the loose. These guys run into the vehicles. They're getting in all the vehicles. They drive this big truck through the gates into the commissary doors, blast these steel doors down. They're taking hostages. Exiting work that day. I'm coming back from work. I'm seeing all this running around. People, but I'm not sure what's going on. You know, I'm coming from my job. I'm heading back I'm coming up the same walk all these guys are. So, okay, someone's fighting. Typical. You know, maybe it's a geographical thing, West Philly, South Philly, something like that. You never know. So I'm heading to the block. I get to the block. I change my clothes. I'm waiting to go back to work. And the guy goes by and said, Brown, what are you doing? I said, I'm waiting to go back to work. He said, Brown, there is a riot going on. I said, no way. He said, go look out your window. So I go to my cell window and I move the curtain and look out. And there is some lieutenants and captains running down the walk. Mob chasing them. They're not going to make it. It's just too long of a walk. There's no way they're going to make it all the way down this entire walk and get away. So they get caught. They bring them back. Obviously now they got control of keys. They end up control of the control center, and they're taking hostages now. So a guy comes on the block. He said, Alan, I don't want you to throw anything at me or hit me, but they have your boss hostage down in the kitchen. They're making him cook. I said, you're telling me they have Joe down in the kitchen? This guy was like my dad. He's not just my supervisor. He's doing things he ain't even supposed to. He's letting me drive the truck and he's teaching me how to drive.
Another mentor.
Yeah. And he's just doing everything for me. I said, well, I got to go get him. That's like my dad. You know, I've learned everything I learned. So I come in the kitchen. These guys got him cooking at the grill. I know it's going to be problems. So go to the biggest mouth there. I got this big oar out the pot they're cooking in, and I just tried to see if I can fit it like a hat on him before I even said anything. So I pinged him with it. He goes down. I said, this is my boss, and he's leaving out of this kitchen with me, and I hope no one is going to make any dumb efforts about trying to keep him here. I said, this is like my father. It's like my family. If one of us have to die today, I'd rather it be me than him. So he's going home. So I get him. No argument from these guys. I take him up to the housing unit. I put him in brown clothes, which is what we wore. I walk him to the rear gate. I said, Joe, I'm going to get you to the rear gate. Keep your clothes on underneath there. I said, when we get to the rear gate, you let them know your staff. You can get out. You can go home. So he said, come with me. I said, I can't. I said, my little brother was also at Camp Hill at the time. I said, I can't leave my little brother here. I got to find him. Because if I don't and he dies, I said, it'd be pretty hard for me to forgive myself for leaving him here. I said, I can't leave. I have to stay. So I didn't leave the mass of what was going on. I got him to the rear gate. I went on back to my housing unit. The very first Christmas card I got when I was in Leavenworth was from Joe's wife. She sent me $100 and a Christmas card. She said, I want to thank you for saving my husband's life, for getting him out of there before he got hurt. I said, lady, I wasn't saving your husband. I was saving the guy that was like my father to me. I was saving the guy that taught me how to use all the equipment I learned how to use. He taught me how to drive the damn truck. I mean, he did everything for me. So it's just no way I could not save him. I had to save him. Or I had to die trying to save him. I was not going to allow him to suffer.
He was more than a mentor.
Yeah, he was like my family. So I got him out of there.
How long was that riot? How many days?
The riot was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday morning they got control. Well, they got control back on Thursday evening because they held a news conference, which was the dumbest thing in the world. They held this news conference. The grievance coordinator stands here in front of these cameras and tell them that he's not, even though he made these promises, they're not going to honor him. They're not going to keep him. These guys are watching this on TV. They're hearing it. So it ignited the second riot. It continued to go on. So the riot went from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday morning. The state police, correctional officers, and the National Guard just all stormed as one group because each time they stormed as a single unit, they became overpowered. So all they were doing was feeding the hostage pool. So they stopped doing that, and they decided to, all right, let's take another approach to this. So they just let everybody burn out, and then they just came in early in the morning with guns and everything. They just rounded us all up, took us to the yards, and you were chained up, and you either made it out there or you didn't. If they didn't make it, then they were just swung like sacks of potatoes up on the flatbed, just pile the guys up on there and then drive them. I don't know where they drove them to, but they drove them somewhere. And the only water you got was from the duck pond, which had everything swimming in it you could imagine, mosquito larvae and all that. I'll never forget the part about the fact that I had these shoes on for 16 days that they had filled up with water from this pond, and I don't need to tell you what that really done to my feet to have that going on like that. But for 16 days, I had those boots on, tied in knots, and I'm chained up. I had those what they call them, the flex ties.
Yeah,
Well, they use them like cuffs.
Velcro.
You can actually still see a little bit of the scar on my wrist.
Zip ties, yeah.
Yeah, they put them on so tight, and my arms behind my back, that they worked their way into my skin, and my skin was healing over them. It became infected and had this big red line all the way up to my armpits on both sides. I couldn't straighten my arms out anymore. Luckily, since I had called my mom during the course of the riot and told her that, hey, you don't have to worry about me. I'm not doing anything stupid. I'm only helping people. I'm on my housing unit. No one's being hurt over here. So she knew. 16 days later, she's calling, and they're telling her, oh, he's all right. He's doing fine. She said, you're full of it. My son was of a mindset to call me during the riot and tell me he was okay. There's no way that 2 weeks after the riot, I'm not hearing from him and he's okay. So she sent the U.S. Marshals down there. I was picked and put on a bus for the feds. I get off at Lewisburg. The warden's face said it all to me. I didn't realize how beat up I was, or just, he was standing there, they had the cameras up. I remember him lowering the camera, and he said, bring that one right there, over here. He called me over, he asked me my name, I told him my name, he asked how old I was. I told him, he said, you look way younger. He said, like a kid, you're like some little kid. So he said, you need to go. They sent me to Springfield, Missouri, which is where it was the Surgeon General's team. That's where like all of the medical people were there. You know, they wear naval uniforms and that. So they sent me there, had them work on my hands. He said, if it would have took them 3 or 4 more days to get me, I wouldn't have hands. They would have been gone.
Gosh,
That's terrible. Yeah.
that's terrible.
So I went through a lot of therapy after that. Took a lot of crazy antibiotics that had all these other crazy side effects, but I needed them. So I started out in the federal system. Just said, okay, this is my chance to shine. This is to be who I am. All of my training kicks into place here and now. This is where it begins. So it began there, and then my journey took me through a couple of other prisons. Came back to here to the States. The pardon thing came up. I tore the papers up because I couldn't get over the fact that this person, Michael's kid, was in prison. And all I could think of was, you know, again, if I hadn't shot his father, his life would not have taken that turn. He could have turned out to be one of the greatest politicians ever. I mean, the possibilities were there to be whatever. So I get the rock view. I have become quite a flautist. I'm playing native flutes. I really love music. I'm playing from, you know, just self-taught. I'm just learning. I'm learning and doing these things. So I'm playing. One day I'm in my room. I'm cleaning my room. And there's this little black spider on the floor. I'm trying like crazy to get this spider on something. I just want to put it outside. It's jumping at me. It's doing everything to try to bite me. And for a nanosecond, I had this thought, why not just kill it, be done with it, and throw it away? And that second, that notion, I became that spider. I wrote an article about the little black spider. That was the way I said, wow, that's the way society seen me, as that little black spider. I wasn't worthy of help. They just threw me away. It was so much easier to just throw me away than to help me. So I took the time to catch this spider. I put it outside. I wrote this article about the little black spider, the analogy that I became this little black spider, and I put her out there in the corner of my window. She built her web. I've caught her bugs. I fed her till she had eggs. I mean, you know, this was my baby.
Like Leonard Salamander.
I took care of this spider. And then when I wrote this article about the little black spider, I submitted it to Greater Friends, which was a prison newsletter. It went all over the United States. That letter got me so many friends that it was unreal. I had pen pals, unbelievably. I was spending a lot of money on envelopes from the commissary just to answer all of these letters. And then some of them would write, like, I met a guy, Red, his wife, they lived in this little town here in Pennsylvania. He was dying, and she found out I was an artist. His favorite bird was the common loon. So I painted the common loon for him, and I sent her this picture, and she just set it in his bed. She said he looked at that picture every day. That was his favorite thing to look at. He said, well, I studied that picture every day until he died. So I started me on a path where I was doing art. I probably did my first 400, maybe 450 paintings. I just donated them to charities out across the country. I just, you know, just wanted to give something back, you know, to reach out. So I have paintings now probably in Canada, Florida, Texas, you know, you name it. I got paintings there. I'm just giving them away.
In the 5 or 10 minutes we have left today, you mentioned Leonard Peltier. Can you tell us a little bit about Mumia Abu-Jamal?
Mumia was always kept severely isolated. He didn't have a life. He had a life a lot like there was a guy in Leavenworth that was head of the Aryans, and he was locked up down 2 flights of steps, around a corner, behind 2 cages, and he was never allowed to have visual or physical contact with any human beings.
Solitary.
Yes. So my job was to take him his food down there, and I would take the food, but I had to put it in a way that where it was in this cell next door, and then I would have to leave, and then the staff would get it and move it over to him. But I was like, well, who's the guy that has to live like worse than an animal? Why can't he see people? Why can't he meet someone? But they just said, Alan, you can't do it. I get it. I know where you're at in your head. You always want to. He said, you are helping him. You're feeding him. You're keeping him alive. That's the best you can do, kid. You can't do anything else for this guy. So that was just the way it was. But that had a profound impact on me to feel like I was a part of the machine that was abusing someone, because I never really seen myself as being abused, because I always tried to look for the good in everything. No matter how bad things were, I always looked for something good in it. And that made it a little easier for me, made it a little more tolerable for me, because it was easier to accept all of the bad things that ever happened in my life, because at the time I was naive. So I had this notion that this is just one more penance that God wants me to pay for having taken someone's life, not realizing at the time that's not how God works. God don't want to punish us every day. But what I did learn from a lot of my suffering in prison is God will never allow you to suffer more than you can endure. He will come and he'll take you before he lets you suffer more than you can endure. And that was my solace, saying, well, if my suffering becomes so great I can't take it anymore, I won't become a Chicago. I won't be climbing up on a chair, putting a rope around my neck or anything like that, because he'll take me before that. Maybe I'll die in my sleep. Yeah. So it made it so much more tolerable for me to live a life that really wasn't a life, and to become a human being. I never lost that desire or that ability to be a human being. I never forgot what was just beyond the fence. I didn't become lost in this ugly world that I'm living in, where you never see the kind of gentler side of anyone. People don't give you salutations in prison. No one says, hey, good morning to you, or things like that. You don't get to hear any of that kind of stuff. So you're kind of numb. You have to kind of disconnect to survive in that environment. So you just stop. Some things you have to stop feeling. You can't feel sad because this person's going through something, and you can't help them because he borrowed drug money or something. You're empathic toward these people, but some things you just have to learn to accept.
You saw everything from the honor unit to what solitary looked like to being
solitary. God.
Outside for 16 days.
To this day, one of the reasons I wear glasses is because I was in the yard, I was at the handball courts, and some guy I didn't even know, he staggers around the wall, he's bloody, he falls into me. So I was sitting up on the wall because I want to run and get staff and to get him some help. Well, some guards come running around the wall. I guess someone's seen him from the tower or whatever. Here I am standing there, blood on my shirt. They throw me in the dungeon for 6 months. This guy was I don't know, I want to say in a coma, but he wasn't awake. He was catatonic, whatever. Well, 6 months later, he comes around, they show him my picture, and said, well, is this the guy that did that to you? He said, this guy was trying to help me. Wow. Well, I've already spent 6 months in the dark in a dungeon that was so pissy smelling down there. People were peeing out, trying to pee outside their cells because they don't have a working facility in their toilet. You're lucky if you get a shower once a week. So my eyes became so adjusted to the dark that I'll never forget when I was taken out of the dungeon. And when I got to the level ground floor in the hall, when they swung the doors open and the light hit me in the face, I went to my knees. It felt like someone just poked my eyes right out of their sockets. It was just
goodness.
I became what they call photosensitive because of that. So that was a pretty ugly time, but it gave me a time to really do my soul searching, my heart searching, and that was where my Olympic training for my spirit, my strength came from that. Am I ever going to make it out of this dungeon? Am I going to die down here? Because you're fighting to breathe. I ended up on inhalers and everything, all you're doing is making your heart weaker the longer you're on them. So
sure.
I just, things like that I always accepted as a part of the penance I had to pay for having ended someone's life.
That's a really powerful story, Alan, and I think we really would like to have you back for another episode to talk about prison reform and what a reentry program should look like.
Oh, yeah.
And you definitely have
I can do
the experience of being a peer mentor to being a case manager that we should explore. But I definitely want to take the time to thank you very much for your insight and your stories and your authenticity. But we're going to wrap up for today, and we will look forward to the next time we get to talk. But on behalf of the Common Liberty Podcast, I'm Jeffrey.
I'm Eric.
Let's load the clip. Thank you very much for tuning in. Like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day. Thank you.
Don't forget to like, guys. That really helps us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome.